Welcome to Talks at Google. I'm Ali Saraf, a product manager on the Google Chrome team. I'm very excited to interview Ash Ali and Hasan Kubba about their book, The Unfair Advantage. Ash is a serial entrepreneur, growth hacker, and startup advisor. He started his first internet company at 19 and then led marketing at Just Eat, a food delivery startup that became a unicorn. Hasan is an entrepreneur, executive coach, and keynote speaker. He started his own passive income business from his bedroom and now coaches some of the biggest founders and content creators in the world. Their book, The Unfair Advantage, examines the role of unfair advantages in our unequal world, unpicks the nature of success, and shows how to increase your chances of achieving it. Their book became an instant bestseller, with their refreshing concept going viral on YouTube, inspiring millions of people. It's also been translated into multiple languages and has won the Business Book of the Year. They've been featured in Forbes, Fortune, and the BBC, and they've guest lectured at top business schools and have shared their experiences on global stages. There'll also be a live Q&A, so please put your questions in the comment chat box. All right, so Hasan and Ash, what actually is an unfair advantage?
Hey, Ali. So when we were writing this book, we were thinking about success in startups at first, but then very quickly realized that this is success in general. This just applies in general. Like, we don't live in a fair world. We don't live in an equal world. It seems like the underlying assumption is that there's an even starting line, it's a level playing field, and we all just need to apply the right strategies, put the hard work in, and it's going to be done. But actually, success is all about unfair advantages. And unfair advantages are simply just having a head start in the race. It's having a competitive upper hand. We don't mean anything illegal or unethical. We just mean that in general, there are ways that you can be ahead because of your inner strengths and your circumstances. And like a simple one, I'll just give you a simple example, is money. And that's the one that comes to most people's minds. It's like money is an unfair advantage. Donald Trump said that his dad gave him a small loan of $1 million. It's just a small loan in the 1970s. So that's just a small example, but there are lots of other unfair advantages. You can have the right look. You can have gone to the right school. You can have worked at the right company. You can have the right passport. You can have the right accent. These are all unfair advantages.
Thanks, Hasan. And based on your backgrounds, you're not stereotypical business book authors, but the book has been hugely successful. It's really resonated with people. So why did you write the book?
Yeah, good question, Ali. So many business books are written by business professors from Ivy League schools, writing about their version of business success, and I found them quite impractical at times. And myself, I'm a second generation Pakistani immigrant, born to a working class family. My dad worked in the steel factory, and I always wanted to have access to a professional or a mentor who could help me through my career. But my dad was working at a steel factory, didn't know. I was helping him with application forms rather than the other way around. And whenever I used to read books, I used to find that I wasn't connecting to those books. And I wasn't getting the story that I was connecting to with where they were in their life and how they were talking about business. And then, I read this book called The Magic of Thinking Big, and it changed my whole world perspective. And I thought a book can change someone's life, and there needs to be a book written. So the reason we wrote this book was for myself, my 20-year-old self, the underdog with a victim mindset, who was lost and didn't know what to do in life, thinking I don't have what it takes to succeed. And so the book is very much a exploratory version of auditing yourself to find out more about yourself and build self-awareness, rather than a prescriptive book that says, wake up at 4 o'clock or just do it. And that's why we wrote this book.
Yeah, and just to give a bit of background on me, I was born in Baghdad. I was 3 years old when I came to the UK. And just in those 3 years, I lived through 2 wars in Iraq. And again, I'd never seen somebody from my background write a book like this. And I'd never seen anything other than the assumption that it's just about the hard work, which obviously hard work is a given, right? But people don't talk about how you can know the right people, or you can have an insight into how an application works, or what kind of careers to go for, or what kind of businesses to start. And a lot of those kinds of things can be unfair advantages. But the key message is that we can all have unfair advantages. That's the key. And we just need to find it and use it.
All right, thank you for that. So how do people find their unfair advantages?
Yeah, so we developed a framework called the Miles framework. So Miles is an acronym. So MILES. M is for money. So money is just the capital that you have or that you can easily raise from friends, family, rich uncles. I is for intelligence and insight. Intelligence isn't just book smarts. Obviously, is partly that as well. So it's not just like IQ and how well you've done at school, but it's also your social and emotional intelligence, your creativity. Insight is about what kind of unique insights you have into a problem, into a domain, into an industry. L is for location and luck, which is basically right place, right time. E is for education and expertise. And that's like, the schooling that you have, but also the self-learning and the learning through experiences and the practical learning, which is usually more valuable anyway. And S is for status. S is the one that's how you come across, who you know, and even like inner status, which like these are all powerful things. It's like people, there's that phrase, don't judge a book by its cover. But the reason that phrase exists because that's what we all do to other people. We judge by the cover, and these unconscious biases exist, and we just have to be aware of them and also see how we can use them or see how we can actually flip them the other way. Because it might seem like, okay, this might seem like, oh, but what if I don't have all these advantages? But there's something more to that.
Yeah, and we talk about this in our book, right? We call it the double-edged sword. How do you turn a disadvantage into an advantage? You might think I don't have any advantages, and myself growing up, I never had much money growing up. For example, let's take M for example. And we know money matters; it makes a big difference in people's lives. But most of my companies that I started, I bootstrapped, and I realized why I was bootstrapping. It's because I'm used to working with less money, and it's forced me to become creative and more resourceful. So the disadvantage of having lack of money has allowed me to start multiple projects, do multiple experiments, start multiple companies, and use my creativity. Um, Education, for example. Let's take education. So I dropped out of college twice. I didn't go to university, but I never ever felt entitled wherever I worked or wherever project I did. I was what I would call a lifelong learner. I learned by doing. I learned by being self-taught and continuously educating myself. We talk about this thing in the book called book smarts versus street smarts, and I think I had more street smarts at that time growing up and building the street smarts, and I started to learn more of the book smarts, and so I turned my street smarts into an advantage, an unfair advantage for me, and then combining these together and stacking them allows you to become more successful. So education, we talk about expertise. I started to build my marketing expertise and stacking my skills up so I could become much more useful to an organization. And the internet was coming out, and internet marketing and digital marketing is now the biggest thing to help companies grow. So I built those skill sets without a degree, just by learning by myself.
Sure. So you mentioned money, right? You've mentioned location. What do you think is the most powerful unfair advantage, unfair advantage, if there is one?
Yeah, I would say status. Status is probably the most powerful one. And one of the reasons for that is that all the other unfair advantages can feed into status. So having more money can increase your status. Having intelligence, being in the right place. Sometimes people sign up their companies or their to be in a prestigious location. Oh, they're based there. That must be great. That must be awesome. And it might just be like a PO box or something. You have like the different things like being well educated or going to a fancy school that can increase your status. So status is really, really powerful because just having that sort of influence. And one thing an example I can give that can really epitomize status is in 2019, Kylie Jenner was on the cover of Forbes magazine as the youngest self-made billionaire in the world. And knowing that Kylie Jenner grew up in the Kardashian household with this hugely successful and famous family, a successful reality TV show, and then for her, to consider her self-made, obviously having all those followers, having that much fame is going to be a huge unfair advantage. And we have a case study of her in the book, actually. So status, I would say status is by far of all of those things, the strongest unfair advantage.
Yeah, and when it comes to status as well, I think that the other part of it is what most status is what most people perceive from the outside. So the watch you have, the clothes you wear, the network you have, the friends you have. One of the things I learned, moving to London from Birmingham, a second city here in the UK, an automotive retail-based city mainly. Moving into the tech world here in London, I saw all these flash cars and everything around, and I started to feel a bit odd with myself, and a lot of imposter syndrome started to come in. But then I realized that, the most important status is not what the external status looks like, but it's the inner status. It's the story we tell ourselves in our head about who we are. And that is more important than the outward status that you have. And that goes with you everywhere in life. And so I started to reframe myself to say, actually, you know what? I belong in London. I belong in this company. I belong in doing startups. And that was the reframing of the way we think about status as an inner status. And I think that's a really important part of status as well.
That's an interesting concept, inner status. So is that about confidence in yourself, for example? I'd love for you to talk a bit more about that.
Yeah, it's about selling yourself to yourself first before you sell yourself to other people.
So basically, if status is how you're perceived by everyone else, inner status is how you perceive yourself. It's your self-talk. It's like your self-esteem, essentially. So how do you look highly upon yourself? Do you respect yourself? Because that comes across. Because our inner thoughts usually come across in our body language, in our mannerisms, even in little micro. They call it. There's this kind of body language, little micro expressions on our faces, different ways that our word choice, the length of our pauses, things come through. So on the inside usually comes out to the outside, usually. And so, yeah, having a higher inner status is a huge, huge unfair advantage. And it's something that we can all create in ourselves. It takes time sometimes, but definitely something that we can all have access to.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely something we have access to. So Hasan, you mentioned earlier the example of Kylie Jenner. Is there such a thing then as a self-made person, given that we each have advantages and different help and backgrounds and everything? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's like a philosophical question, really, when you get to it, because like, did we choose the upbringing we had? Did we choose where we were born, the kind of parents that we had, the kind of schools we had, the kind of direction we were put in, our own sort of natural talents, the kind of potential that we can then develop further into actual skills? Is that stuff that we've merited? This comes back to one of the core themes in the book is meritocracy, or pure hard work as a cause for success versus pure luck, fate. It's all just random. And of course the answer is squarely in the middle. It's not purely just about what we've done. We have agency in the world, obviously. We have some impact on our results, on our outcomes, but not fully. And likewise, there is luck, but again, you can create your own luck. And there's also a section in the book about how you can actually increase your chances of getting lucky and being in the right place at the right time. But it's firmly in the middle. And that's why being self-made is a funny concept. Now, of course, some people are more self-made than others. Like if you look at the example of Oprah Winfrey, she grew up in 1950s, like rural Mississippi. She had like abuse when she was younger. She had a really terrible childhood and upbringing. And it's like, yeah, you can see her as a self-made woman. But then you can also look on the flip side and say, actually, she was a really talented speaker from a very young age. Maybe the kind of trauma that she went through helped her to have more empathy. The negative of what she went through helped her to be more compassionate, which is what helped her show be famous and become this huge network and become a self-made billionaire, one of the most successful women in the world. So, yeah, basically, some people are more self-made than others, but we can't take full kind of sort of ownership, or we can't blame ourselves fully for failures, and we can't also congratulate ourselves fully for successes. There's always an element of luck. There's always an element of we need to be grateful for the kind of the blessings that we've had. So anyone who's like sort of self-aware enough, we've really noticed that any successful person who's self-aware enough is always like, there's so many ways that I got lucky. And that's just a clear and common thing.
Yeah, we interviewed hundreds of entrepreneurs for this book and looked at hundreds of different entrepreneurs' stories. And every one of them pretty much mentioned the word, I got lucky somewhere, or we got lucky, right? And then we were, okay, so how do we unpack what luck is? And that's why at the start of the book, there's the whole understand section, which is about understanding what hard work is and luck and what does it mean. And so we wanted to start off with that to let people know that it's not just you that's at fault. Sometimes the timing and luck, being in the right place at the right time, can make a massive difference. So don't beat yourself up about not having the success that someone else might have. And that's really important to know that and understand that as well. And that everyone has their own luck and different types of luck.
Sure. Thanks for sharing that. So you touched on gratitude and being grateful, and this is also something that you've mentioned a lot in the book too. So could you tell us a bit more about that and how that plays into the unfair advantage?
Yeah, so that's the key. The key is, look, life is unfair, but should we despair at that? No, we should definitely make strides to make it more fair. But I think no matter what we do as human beings, we're going to have these cognitive biases to an extent. There's always going to be some injustice. So that's just life, right? So, okay, so how do we deal with that? Well, success comes from identifying and then leveraging unfair advantages, right? So we've touched on a few little examples, but it's also about putting in the work and making that happen. And then the question is, how do we make people understand that this isn't bad news, not to have a victim mindset around it? That's what gratitude is about, because you can turn a disadvantage into an advantage. So we draw the Miles framework in the book as a diagram, and it's on the foundation of mindset. And having the right mindset can turn a disadvantage into an advantage. Now, it doesn't mean it's not a disadvantage anymore. It just means that maybe there's a positive spin on it. Maybe there's something you can use to leverage it. Maybe there's something. So just a very quick example that just pops into my mind as a case study. Sarah Blakely, she's a self-made billionaire, another one, she started off as a door-to-door fax saleswoman. And she used to go around in the Florida heat wearing these thick, hot tights and just really be sweating. And she had this insight, a unique insight. So she always wanted to start a company. In fact, she wanted to be on Oprah just to link it there. But she struggled. She really struggled of what to do, what idea to have. She tried lots of things and failed. Eventually, she came upon this idea inspired by her wearing these tights and then actually cutting off the feet but wearing them to a party and having the right shapewear. And that's an insight that probably a man wouldn't have come up with. So her disadvantage of it's harder to get funding as a woman, just generally, if you look at the statistics and you don't fit the pattern. We talk about pattern recognition as a key thing. And if you want to kind of fit into something, sometimes you need to be in the right subculture or be the right demographic. Unfortunately, this is the unfortunate reality of how things are. But she was able to use her insights, so her disadvantage as status as a woman, unfortunately that's a disadvantage, but hey, especially in the late 90s, and then turn that into an advantage in the insight that she had. So there's lots of examples in our book. So she had this insight as a woman that, Spanx. She created this product called Spanx, which is all about shapewear, and she became a billionaire out of it. And that is just one small way that you can turn a disadvantage into an advantage. Being in the wrong location, it's a disadvantage because there's not as many opportunities. But now with the internet opening things up, you have lower costs of living. You got an ability to kind of hire staff at a lower rate. There's also lots of different ways of looking at things. You might have insights that people from larger cities or hubs won't have. So these are just some ways that you need to be grateful and turn disadvantages into advantages, and just be grateful for the blessings that you've got.
Yeah, I mean, gratitude is the ultimate hack for happiness, right? Every day, waking up in the morning and having the opportunity to go out and do what you want to do. There's people who can't do that. And looking at it from a minuscule perspective, because there's a lot of things that we look at and we think, hey, I don't have this, I don't have that. But the whole idea is actually, what do you have that's beneficial to you, and what can you be grateful for? Because there's going to be somebody else who has less, and they've got to do with what they have. And so, we live in an age where, you can call a cab in 2 minutes and order a pizza in 20 minutes and so on. And gratitude is something which we as young people growing up, especially, my daughter, I think, look at our younger children, how can we show them to have gratitude for the things that they do have that we didn't have, and it is the ultimate hack for being happy.
Yeah, I really like that. That's really refreshing. Thanks for sharing that. Coming back to unfair advantages, are there unfair advantages that people generally overlook or don't value as much, dismiss, maybe?
Yeah. So speaking of gratitude, health, like one thing that isn't in the Mars framework, but is very, very important, is having good health, being able to have the energy to be able to do things in the world, work on your career, start a project, start a nonprofit, start a business, do things. And even like not having even the health of your loved ones, because being a caregiver can be a huge disadvantage in like your career or your business or whatever it might be, even in your studies if you're young. So health is just absolutely massive. And it's that thing that you don't appreciate your health until you get ill or you become unwell. And it's just this unfortunate reality of human psychology that we have to keep reminding ourselves to be grateful that we're healthy. And it's just such a basic thing, but so important.
Yeah, and there's so many small unfair advantages we have that we don't realize. Your passport, where you live, living in the right place, having two loving parents. These are very small things, but these are things that can make a difference to your life. And just understanding that you've got these as unfair advantages. But in the business context, let's take it from a business context. I remember starting a company in the minicab industry, and I moved from Just Eat at the time, which was all about getting our takeaways orders from to restaurants, and it was web bookings and it was online bookings, and I moved to the kind of minicab industry, which is all about taxis and like the Uber industry. And when I start to speak to the minicab owners, they were all like, yeah, give me more bookings. We want more bookings. And then eventually when I started to speak more about exactly what they want, they were like, actually, can you just make my phone ring? And I was like, what do you mean just make your phone ring? Like, yeah, we just want more bookings. We want just make my phone ring. And so we changed our strapline on our website to say that we make your phone ring, but then we use an insight. And sometimes we misunderstand some of these smaller insights we have in business. And one of them was the fact that at the time, Google yourselves were launching this feature called click to call. I saw this click to call feature being launched, and I realized that most people were Googling a minicab firm and just clicking the top link to call a cab. We took advantage of this opportunity and generated millions of phone calls for our clients who just wanted phone calls. They didn't want web bookings to sit there and look through the web bookings. That was just like an added bonus for them. They just literally wanted their phone to ring. And we built a whole platform for this. So we spent millions on Google AdWords, generating millions for our clients in bookings. And that was because of the timing of the fact that you were launching this click to call functionality. And we were one of the first people to utilize that. And that was an insight that I'd had just by talking to them about what they wanted, rather than thinking about what I should give them and what we think that everyone wants. So having insights like this, and we overlook them sometimes, but you can actually turn them into really good businesses and ideas.
Nice example, Ash, and great advert for Google AdWords as well. Let's switch gears a bit. I'm personally really into movies, for example, and so I'm curious if you had to pick a movie that really resonates with the main message of your book, what would it be and why?
Ooh, okay. So, I'm a big fan of Indiana Jones. And I know there's a new one coming out soon, but Indiana Jones, the Raiders of the Lost Ark. It came out in 1981. If you haven't seen it, please go and watch it because it's amazing. It's one of the first Indiana Jones. I grew up with it in my childhood. And there's a scene in the Indiana Jones where Harrison Ford is running through the bazaars of Egypt, fighting off these swordsmen and all these bandits, trying to get away. And he's got his satchel with him, and he's got his whip with him, and he's whipping them everywhere. And then all of a sudden, he gets to the end of the bazaar, and there's a showdown with this one man wearing a black robe and a massive sword, and he's twirling it around and showing them, look at this. And it was like a big showdown, and Harrison Ford standing on one side, he's standing on the other side. Everyone's gathered around to watch this big fight happen now. And then Harrison Ford, at that moment, the music starts to change, and Harrison Ford literally pulls out his pistol revolver and just shoots him, and the fight's over. And I was like, well, that's what you call an epitome of what an unfair advantage is. And it really stayed in my mind. So I suppose that's a film which I think is very memorable and something close to unfair advantage.
I was trying to think for me what it would be as Ash was saying that. I remember that scene. That's a really funny one. Yeah, a technological unfair advantage there. I would say it's the pursuit of happiness. Pursuit of Happiness is that Will Smith film that came out like I think late 2000s. And he just struggles, and he's just got every disadvantage. He's just got his luck is all out. He was trying to sell some medical device, again, door to door. He was struggling. At one point, it's just a brilliant scene, very heart wrenching, can just bring tears to your eyes, because at one point he just ends up sleeping in a public bathroom overnight with his son, just to get by. He was homeless. So it's just like gut wrenching, and then with a happy ending. And sorry if that's a spoiler, but it's called The Pursuit of Happiness. And but it's just like how difficult it was for him. It's this whole idea of, I mean, we're in London, yeah, but the idea of the American dream is so powerful that we all kind of believe in that rags to riches story. And I think sometimes one way to look at those stories, they're very inspiring, but one way to look at them is, why was it so difficult for them? Are there structural barriers that we can help alleviate? Is there something we can do as a society to help make it not so difficult? And the other thing is just the personal struggles. It's that hero's journey of like, to get to that end point where he gets what he wants. It's just amazing. So I think Pursuit of Happiness. And the other thing that came to my mind is there's the story of, I hope they one day make this into a movie, but we have a case study of Canva, which is a great product. The founder is Melanie Perkins and her now husband, Cliff Obrecht, I think his name is. And the struggles they went through to get funding and get their startup off the ground is incredible. And the stuff they had to do and the struggles and all the different disadvantages that they had was just incredible. So if they can make that into a movie, that would be an amazing film, which really epitomizes unfair advantages in the whole journey.
Yeah, a big plus one to that. I'd love that great success story to become a film. So thank you for sharing that. Now, imagine you've got a time machine and you've got the ability to tell your 18-year-old self something about life and unfair advantages. What would you tell him?
Ooh. My 18-year-old self. I still think I'm a bit like this now, actually. I'm a bit of a people pleaser. And going to school, I never really fitted in with everybody else, but everyone's taught to fit in. And if I can go back to myself, I would say, have the courage to be disliked. Have the courage to do what you want to do, not have the expectations of your parents or your family telling you what to do. And then have the courage to enjoy the journey. Having done so many different startups and had success and failures in different startups, I've realized that once you get to the end goal, you're like, oh, okay. And it's all about the journey. So I would say, enjoy the journey when you're young and you're growing up. Because, you get to my age and you realize, actually, I could have enjoyed a lot of those things, and you're stressing and you're thinking, and now you look back at it and go, okay, I could have relaxed at that point. And then also doing businesses where people said the idea is not going to work. I mean, people said Just Eat's not going to work. Who's going to order takeaway on the internet? Who's going to order a cab from an app? People said, these things aren't going to work. In the early times, I know so many investors who missed out on these opportunities. So, if there's one thing, it's the courage to be disliked.
Nice. I want to add. So for me, it's I'll just do more things. So one of the things that we talk about in luck is just increase your surface area to luck. Like literally, like nobody's counting how many times you roll the dice. So let's say rolling the dice, it's 1 in 6 to get a 6, right? But if nobody's counting how many times you roll it, if you just keep rolling it until you do get the 6, that's awesome. And that is how life works. If you have a success, everyone forgets about your failures. No one really is focused on, how many times people failed before they had their huge success. And if you dig in, which we've done for the book, and dig into huge success stories, you see that there's often a string of failures at the start before they find the thing that works. So I think I wish I'd done more things. One of the things is that I was thinking of starting a YouTube channel like 10 years ago. And I was like, it's too late for YouTube. And I wish I'd just done it. And I had this kind of imposter syndrome around like, I don't want to be an expert around this. I don't want to talk about this. But if I didn't realize back then that actually what I did have is enough expertise to get started, just because I was passionate about something, just because I wanted to, I really like to share it. And people were telling me, you should write a book about, so I was like, one of the procrastination things I was doing when I was at university is learning about diet and fitness and health and stuff like that. People used to tell me, you should write a book, you should coach people, and all these people were like losing weight at the time because of my advice. And I was like, no, I just read a few blogs online, and it's just that imposter syndrome of not going for it. And it's funny because now I coach YouTubers, and I coach like really big YouTubers, I coach big startup founders. Again, I didn't even think about startup as a thing. I didn't think about business as a thing. I didn't try enough things. I would say it took me until my late 20s to really figure out my unfair advantages. And it takes time. It's like self-knowledge, that journey. But but you can speed it up by trying more things and just getting that insight into yourself of what do you enjoy. You increase your surface area to luck. So that would be my advice. I would have done more when I was younger.
Yeah, it's one of those things where when you're younger, you just have a lot more spare time in general, and our time could be used to do many additional things, right? Whether it's doing more things and not being afraid to do certain things that you like, having the courage to be disliked. So yeah, those are really important. All right, so people will be watching this, and different people will have different struggles, and people are going through life in different ways. And so what piece of advice would you give to people who feel like their luck has run out? Maybe they don't have unfair advantages, because there will be people who are less fortunate than others, right? So what kind of advice would you give to these people?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think the first thing is to build self-awareness for yourself, and audit yourself on the advantages you do have, or ask people around you what things you're good at, and look at your strengths and look at your circumstances in a different frame of through a different lens. The thing with the unfair advantage and the Miles framework is that not only is it good for introspective work, but it's also a great lens to look at outside to other people who are successful as well. You know, when you say your luck's run out, it's because you're thinking that someone else has got something that you want, or someone you're missing out on something. But having that lens of the unfair advantage Miles framework, it allows you to see actually those people have got unfair advantages, and that's what's making them successful, and that's what's making them lucky. What are my unfair advantages, and how can I utilize those and become more lucky? And it's the smaller things you can start off with, you know, where you live, or having a roof over your head, and having good food and having good health, and then starting from that and building up. And then you start looking at your career and going into, okay, what type of jobs have you worked at? You know, like you know, there's so many different ways you could utilize that. There's so many people who underplayed the previous companies they worked at. You know, there's a lot that is going towards why so many press releases say ex Googlers, ex JP Morgan, ex Just Eat person has founded a new company and got investment, because that helps build the unfair advantage to say it's a status thing, right? But sometimes people don't even realize that. Oh yeah, I worked at this company. I don't really mention it much, but you can actually utilize that to get press and get coverage, and you see that a lot. And there's a lot of people who don't know how to utilize that. And looking at yourself and asking other people around you what you're good at, and having that introspective look is important. And then exploring it, and then going out into the world and telling your story and reframing that. I think that's the key thing: reframing your story and telling your story. Just because something negative has happened to you could actually be a blessing. You know, we are all unique humans. Our the iris is unique to us. There's only one. Our fingerprint is unique to us. There's only one of fingerprint of us. There's only one of us. We're completely unique. And that uniqueness needs to be brought into the world in whatever project or picture, or wherever you want to go and do whatever you want to do. And that's starting off with developing what your unfair advantages are, so you can actually help yourself, accelerate yourself towards success on the project or whatever you're doing.
Yeah. I think the only thing like self-awareness is the biggest thing. Like, a huge theme in the book is know thyself. You know, that old ancient Greek maxim from the ancient Greek philosophers, know thyself. And just that self-awareness and the self-knowledge, that's the thing I was referring to. It takes time. You get feedback. You figure out what you enjoy, what you're good at. And also, the other thing to bear in mind is one way we talk about location and luck, meaning what we say there is right place, right time, is timing. And timing is also important in looking at the trends, looking at what's happening in the market. So it matters what you're good at and what you enjoy, but it also matters what other people value. And if you look at different trends and see what people value, you can quite quickly upskill and build some expertise, the unfair advantage of expertise in a growing area, because it's a new area, so nobody's got 10 years experience in it. It's like if somebody's learning about like generative AI right now as we're recording this, like that's a new thing, like a relatively new thing, or new in this context of the latest kind of chat companies and generative AI. Right, just as a quick example, there's a lot of trends. It's not just technological trends; it's also like consumer trends or just like fashions or tastes. So look into that as well, and that's how you can sort of develop unfair advantages.
Great. And I'm curious. So you mentioned, for example, Canva. Are there any other case studies that we'd really want to highlight to the listeners today? Obviously, they can check out the book and they can read and listen to it. But would love to hear another case study, just as like one of the final things.
Yeah, so it's a bit funny to do Google to Google, but I'm tempted to now because Google is a great case study that we also have in the book. And Larry Page and Sergey Brin, there's this stereotype that startup founders are college dropouts, but and university is not useful. And it's like, well, actually, sometimes, and in the case of Google, it came from a PhD thesis. Like that might not be news to anybody working at Google, but to other viewers, like it was a thesis. They called it back rub. And it was from the mentors at Stanford University who helped them and helped develop it into a company. And they actually just wanted to license it or sell it early on, and they didn't. But it's fascinating how that unfair advantage of education and expertise into solving a problem. Google wasn't the first search engine by any stretch of the imagination. It was actually a crowded space when they went in. In terms of timing, there's also this myth of being first is better when it isn't. But it was quite a saturated market. But they just did it so much better. Google did it so much better in terms of giving you the right results. So that's an unfair advantage of like solving the problem better. One way to think of it is like the insight. It's very interesting because the unfair advantage of insight and the unfair advantage of expertise or education and expertise. The insight is to define the problem from an entrepreneurial sense, and the expertise is to solve it. So it's to come up with a good solution. And both are super, super important. So that's another just great case study that we could talk about.
Yeah, we've got lots of great case studies in the book, actually. Very well-known companies. But I also think that just taking it yourself and being curious with life itself, like, I've always asked a lot of questions and have had a lot of business people around me. And, like we look at people who are like, 20 or 30 years ahead of us, or companies who are like 10, 20 years ahead of us, and think about how they're doing things. It's like going to a billionaire and asking them, how do you get an invoice paid or do an invoice? It's like, it's kind of quite far. And so what you want to do is you want to look at people who are 5 or 10 years ahead of you as case studies potentially for yourself, because that's where you're going to learn the most around how you can grow, and ask them questions around it. Because we always look at the big success stories, but there's lots of other success stories that you don't hear about. And that's what we did with the book as well. We're speaking to other entrepreneurs who started companies 5, 10 years ahead of you. And you learn a lot more practical steps from those case studies.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. And also there's another thing, a lot of people ask me, Ash, how did you grow Just Eat so fast? And, like we use techniques in that time that don't exist now, right? But there's fundamentals of marketing still remain the same. So they're ideas and tactics, but that's not going to answer your question now, right? And that's the thing. So it's important to understand the thinking behind the strategies, and having people who are 2 or 3 years or 5 years ahead of you doing something that's in the right time. And you learn a lot more from those personal case studies. These ones will give you the idea of exactly how they did it and some of the unfair advantages that exist. And you can also copy those. You can also see when you're 18 years old, for example, you don't have a network, and you need to build a network. But that doesn't mean you now can't have that unfair advantage of network, because the thing with unfair advantages and a lot of these case studies and the way we talk about them is that a lot of unfair advantages compound over time, and they stack up and they build over time. And so what you have as an unfair advantage when you're 18 is very different to what you have as an unfair advantage when you're 30. When you've been working for a while, you've got a bigger network. But knowing what that an unfair advantage is important at an earlier and a younger age. Well, we've got people who send us, emails. We had a 14-year-old send us an email once and goes, Ash, do you think I should go to university? It's like, please don't ask me. I'm the wrong person to ask. I dropped out twice. But, and then we got a 74-year-old who's a retired dentist entrepreneur saying, oh, I love your book and I really understand it. And this is why I understand it. And so in terms of case studies, it's the readers have come back to us now, and they've explored and given us a lot more. And those anecdotal stories of how they use the unfair advantage to succeed in life has been really refreshing, actually. But there's some great ones in the book as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I could talk to you both all day, but I know we have many questions as well. We just have time for one or two. So let's take the first one by Lauren. During your interviews with entrepreneurs, what was the most surprising thing you heard?
I think the most surprising thing I heard, and I didn't know I had it as well, was that entrepreneurs are generally trying to prove themselves. And generally, we have a chip on our shoulder. And generally, that comes from your childhood or your upbringing. And I noticed that. And I was quite unaware of that. I thought it's only successful people who then start companies because they're already successful, right? But actually, it's when you come from a disadvantage or come from a point of pain, when you want to prove something. One of the things I had a chip on my shoulder was I want to prove that I can build startups and companies, even though I don't have a degree, right? And I became self-aware of that and go, why do I keep talking about it? And I was like, oh, okay, I understand that now, why I do that. So I had to prove myself. So I didn't realize how many of the entrepreneurs that I interviewed were all really just trying to prove themselves a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I think it's this whole idea of, and I learned this from Ash, I call myself an unnatural entrepreneur in that I took an online course to learn about entrepreneurship. The stories in the book about how literally I took an online course and it taught me how to start a business, and that I was able to automate that business and create a passive income stream. It was hard. That makes it sound easy because I'm saying it so fast, but it was really difficult. But one thing that I learned from like more natural entrepreneurs is they learn by doing. And that's something I had to pick up. They learn by doing, and they learn by learning from other people ahead of them. So they have mentors, and I ended up having amazing mentors on my journey. Mentors, coaches. That's why coaching is really growing as a field, because there's not a lack of knowledge. Everything's available now online, but you need that kind of clarity of what to do next and the accountability. And that's why coaching is such a valuable skill set for managers, for people just hire them for different areas of their life. And back in the day, it used to just be sports, but a coach in lots of different areas has become such a valuable thing. So like that ability to learn by doing and ability to learn just by talking to people and just by applying things. I think that's a huge piece that we got.
Yeah. And just to add to that as well, the other thing I also noticed is that you don't hit the bullseye on your first throw of the dart. And some people think that you just hit the bullseye on your first throw of the dart. You have to throw quite a few darts to get to hit the bullseye. So when we met entrepreneurs, there's a lot of, they're known for certain things, but there's a lot of things they've done beforehand that not many people know about. And those were themselves throwing the darts to the board and missing. But then the one they hit is the one that everyone knows them about. And so past failures, a lot of past failures, the best entrepreneurs had the most failures, I noticed as well. I've had a lot of failures as well. So I learned from that, and I saw that with entrepreneurs as well.
Great. All right. So I was going to ask another question from the comments, but I'll just close off on this final question for each of you. What's next?
So I currently run a company called UHubs. We build sales academies for B2B tech companies. And we get invited all over the world now to share the unfair advantage as keynote speakers. We do workshops. We talk a lot about creativity and innovation and how to make the most of whatever you have in your business, whether it's a brand or money or wherever you are in yourself. So so what's next for us? Maybe a second book coming soon. Who knows? There's a lot more out there, and we're talking to a lot of different people right now.
For me, I think it's just doing more in-person speaking because things are opened up. So getting back to that is fun. Zoom has been cool because you could reach people all over the world, but to actually feel people, one of the ways we developed the concepts of the book is speaking to people in person, getting feedback, getting questions. We almost had the minimum viable book because we did this whole approach for the book. So just getting back to speaking. I love teaching. I think teaching, whether it's on camera or whether it's in person, workshops, stuff like that. I love explaining complicated concepts and simplifying it. Coaching, I'm doing more of that as well. So yeah, just it's going to be a fun year. I think it's going to be a lot more travel, a lot more speaking. Consulting with some startups, really fun. Advising some startups, doing a little bit of that. So yeah, that's what we're doing next.
Sounds great. Just want to reiterate again that the book is available worldwide, right? And you can listen to it in audiobook, which the audiobook also features Hasan and Ash as well, which is great. So I want to give a
That's right.
huge thank you to Hasan and Ash for joining. Big thank you to the audience for tuning in and for asking questions. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.